What happens when a prince who preaches about mental health awareness completely loses his mind on live television? Well, buckle up because you're about to witness one of the most shocking celebrity meltdowns ever caught on camera. Before we dive into this absolute train wreck, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below with your thoughts on what you think really triggered this royal explosion. The Late Show with Stephen Colbert was supposed to be just another promotional stop for Prince Harry. He was there to discuss his latest mental health initiative, something that should have been a softball interview. But what started as a friendly conversation quickly spiraled into television history for all the wrong reasons. Stephen Colbert, known for his sharp wit but generally respectful interviewing style, welcomed Prince Harry with his usual charm. The studio audience was buzzing with excitement, phones out, ready to capture what they thought would be inspiring sound bites about mental wellness and royal advocacy. "So, Harry, you've been very vocal about the importance of mental health awareness," Colbert began, settling back in his chair with that familiar late-night host smile. "Tell us about your new campaign and why this cause means so much to you." "Prince." Harry shifted in his seat, his jaw already showing the first signs of tension. "Well, Stephen, mental health is something that affects everyone, regardless of status or privilege. We need to break down the stigma and create safe spaces for people to share their struggles." The words sounded rehearsed, almost robotic. Colbert, ever the professional, nodded along, but his interviewer instincts were already picking up on something beneath the surface. "That's wonderful, and I think a lot of people appreciate your openness about your own mental health journey. But I have to ask, and forgive me if this seems pointed, but some critics have suggested that your advocacy feels somewhat disconnected from the reality most people face. How do you respond to that?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. The studio audience, initially warm and welcoming, seemed to sense the shift in energy. Prince Harry's hands gripped the armrests of his chair slightly tighter. "Critics will always find something to complain about, Stephen. What matters is the work we're doing and the lives we're changing. I don't think someone needs to live in poverty to understand suffering." Colbert raised an eyebrow, his comedic timing impeccable even in serious moments. "Of course not. But don't you think there's something to be said for understanding the struggles of people who can't afford therapy, who don't have the luxury of taking time off work to focus on their mental health, who don't have a platform to share their story?" The prince's face began to flush slightly. "I think you're oversimplifying a very complex issue, Stephen. Just because someone has privilege doesn't mean their pain isn't real or that their advocacy isn't genuine." "I'm not questioning the reality of your pain," Colbert replied, his tone remaining measured but firm. "I'm questioning whether someone who has never worried about paying rent can truly understand the mental health crisis facing working families." The tension in the studio was becoming palpable. The audience, initially excited to see their beloved late-night host interview royalty, was now witnessing something far more uncomfortable than anyone had anticipated. Prince Harry leaned forward, his voice taking on an edge that hadn't been there moments before. "You know what, Stephen? I think you're being deliberately provocative here. I've been through more trauma than most people could imagine. I lost my mother. I served in combat. I've dealt with panic attacks and anxiety that would cripple most people. And I respect that," Colbert responded, not backing down despite the increasingly hostile energy from his guest. "But trauma and privilege aren't mutually exclusive. You can acknowledge both without dismissing one." The prince's composure was beginning to crack in ways that his media training had never prepared him for. "I don't need a lecture from a talk show host about privilege and trauma. Do you know what it's like to have your every move scrutinized, to have people question your motives for trying to help others?" Colbert's expression shifted slightly, a mix of concern and professional curiosity. This wasn't going according to anyone's script, but he was committed to the conversation. "Actually, as someone in the public eye, I do have some understanding of scrutiny, but I also recognize that my scrutiny comes with compensation and choice in a way that's different from yours." "Different from mine." Prince Harry's voice was rising now, his carefully maintained royal composure slipping with each exchange. "You think being born into this circus was a choice? You think I chose to have my life dissected by tabloids and comedians like you?" The audience was now completely silent. Phones still recording, but the energy in the room had shifted from excitement to genuine discomfort. This was no longer an interview. It was becoming something else entirely. Colbert, to his credit, maintained his professionalism even as his guest was clearly spiraling. "I never said it was a choice, Harry. But advocating for mental health while seeming disconnected from the financial realities that prevent most people from accessing that help, that's worth discussing, don't you think?" Prince Harry stood up abruptly, his chair rolling backward slightly. The sudden movement caused a few audience members to gasp. "You know what's worth discussing, Stephen? The fact that you're using my appearance on your show to score cheap political points instead of actually caring about the mental health crisis you claim to be so concerned about." Colbert remained seated, his hands folded calmly on his desk, but his eyes showed he was calculating his next move carefully. The prince was still standing, towering over the host in what felt like an attempt at intimidation that was backfiring spectacularly on live television. "Harry, I think you might want to sit back down," Colbert said with the kind of calm authority that comes from years of handling difficult interviews. "We're having a conversation here, not a confrontation." "A conversation?" Prince Harry laughed, but there was no humor in it. The sound was sharp and bitter, cutting through the studio silence like a blade. "You ambushed me, Stephen. I came here to talk about helping people, and you've turned this into some kind of class warfare debate." The audience was now completely frozen, watching what felt like a slow-motion car crash. Some were still recording, others had put their phones down entirely, too uncomfortable to continue capturing what was clearly becoming a very public breakdown. "I asked legitimate questions about your advocacy work," Colbert replied, his voice steady but firm. "If that feels like an ambush, maybe that says more about the work than it does about my questions." Prince Harry's face was now fully flushed, his breathing visibly heavier. "You have no idea what you're talking about. None. You sit here in your comfortable studio, making jokes about people's lives, and you think that gives you the right to judge actual activism?" "I'm not judging your activism. I'm examining it," Colbert shot back, finally showing a flash of his own frustration. "There's a difference, and if you can't handle that examination, maybe you shouldn't be doing television interviews." The words hit Prince Harry like a physical blow. His mouth opened and closed for a moment, as if his brain was processing an error message. When he finally spoke, his voice had dropped to something almost menacing. "Maybe I shouldn't be doing television interviews. Maybe you shouldn't be doing them either if this is how you treat guests who are actually trying to make a difference in the world." Colbert stood up now too, matching the prince's energy but maintaining his composure in a way that made the contrast even more stark. "Harry, I've interviewed presidents, activists, Nobel Prize winners, people who have changed the world in measurable ways. They all managed to handle tough questions without having a meltdown on my stage." "A meltdown?" Prince Harry's voice cracked slightly on the words. "This isn't a meltdown. This is me refusing to be disrespected by someone who makes a living mocking people better than him." The studio audience was now audibly uncomfortable, with several people whispering to each other and looking toward the exits. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every moment of what was clearly becoming television history for all the wrong reasons. "Better than me?" Colbert's eyebrows shot up, his trademark expression of mock surprise appearing despite the serious nature of the situation. "Is that what this is about? You think your birth circumstances make you better than people who work for their positions?" Prince Harry's hands were now visibly shaking, whether from anger or adrenaline was impossible to tell. "I've served my country, I've sacrificed more than you could ever understand, and I've dedicated my life to helping others. What have you done besides make jokes and tear down people who are actually trying to change things?" "I've created a platform that brings important issues to millions of people every night," Colbert replied, his own voice rising slightly now. I've raised awareness and funds for countless causes, and I've done it without claiming that my privileged background somehow makes me more qualified to speak for people I've never met. The prince took a step closer to Colbert's desk, his body language becoming increasingly aggressive. Several audience members were now clearly uncomfortable, with some standing up as if preparing to leave. "Privileged background?" Prince Harry's voice was now almost a shout. "You want to talk about privilege? You chose this life, Stephen. You chose to be in the spotlight. You chose to build your career on making fun of others. I was born into a system I never asked for, trapped in a role I never wanted. And when I try to use that platform for good, people like you tear me down." Colbert's expression shifted slightly, showing what might have been genuine concern mixed with professional determination. "Nobody's tearing you down for doing good work, Harry. But when you claim to understand struggles you've never faced, when you speak for communities you've never belonged to, people are going to ask questions. That's not persecution. That's accountability." "Accountability?" Prince Harry laughed again, that same bitter sound that was becoming increasingly unhinged. "From you? A comedian who's never done anything but criticize from the sidelines? You want to hold me accountable while you hide behind jokes and sarcasm?" The situation was clearly escalating beyond what anyone in the studio had prepared for. Colbert glanced briefly toward his producers off stage, a subtle signal that even he was beginning to recognize this interview had gone completely off the rails. "I'm not hiding behind anything," Colbert said, his voice taking on a firmer edge. "I'm asking direct questions, and you're responding with personal attacks instead of answers. That's not how this works, even for princes." "Even for princes?" Prince Harry stepped even closer to the desk, his voice now carrying a tone that made several audience members visibly flinch. "There it is, the real Stephen Colbert. You think you can disrespect me because you're in your little kingdom here, surrounded by your audience and your cameras." Colbert remained remarkably calm despite having an increasingly agitated member of the British royal family looming over his desk. "Harry, I think you need to take a breath and remember where you are and what you're here to discuss." "Don't tell me what I need to do," Prince Harry snapped, his finger now pointing directly at Colbert. "Don't you dare lecture me about composure when you've been attacking me from the moment I sat down." The studio had become a powder keg, and everyone could sense that something was about to explode. Colbert, still maintaining his composure despite having a visibly agitated prince pointing at him across his desk, made one final attempt at de-escalation. "Harry, let's take a step back here. You came on the show to talk about mental health, so let's talk about what's happening right now. You're clearly upset, your breathing is elevated, you're making personal attacks instead of addressing the issues. Is this the kind of mental health awareness you're advocating for?" The question landed like a nuclear bomb. Prince Harry's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, rage, and something that looked almost like recognition before settling on pure fury. The irony of the moment was lost on him entirely, but it wasn't lost on anyone else in the studio. "Are you psychoanalyzing me on live television?" Prince Harry's voice had reached a pitch that was genuinely alarming. "Are you seriously trying to diagnose me right now?" "I'm not diagnosing anything," Colbert replied, his own patience finally starting to fray at the edges. "I'm pointing out that someone who claims to be an expert on mental health is currently demonstrating a complete inability to regulate their own emotions on national television." The words hung in the air like an accusation, and Prince Harry's reaction was immediate and volcanic. He slammed his hand down on Colbert's desk so hard that the host's coffee mug jumped and spilled across his notes. "How dare you?" Prince Harry roared, his voice echoing through the studio. "How dare you use my advocacy against me? You have no idea what I've been through, what I deal with every single day." The audience was now in full panic mode. Several people were actively leaving their seats, security guards were moving closer to the stage, and the cameras kept rolling, capturing every moment of what was clearly the most spectacular guest meltdown in late-night television history. Colbert looked down at his coffee-soaked notes, then back up at Prince Harry with an expression that had shifted from professional concern to genuine alarm. "You need to calm down right now, or this interview is over." "The interview was over the moment you decided to ambush me," Prince Harry shot back, his voice cracking with rage, and something that sounded almost like hysteria. "You brought me here under false pretenses to humiliate me, to make me look unstable, for your audience's entertainment." "Nobody brought you here to humiliate you," Colbert said, standing up and taking a step back from his desk as Prince Harry continued to loom over it. "You're doing that all by yourself right now." The observation was brutal in its accuracy, and it seemed to break something fundamental in Prince Harry's already fractured composure. He began gesturing wildly, his movements becoming increasingly erratic and unpredictable. "All by myself? All by myself?" Prince Harry's laugh was now completely unhinged, a sound that made several audience members audibly gasp. "You've been setting me up from question one, and now you're acting like I'm the problem. This is exactly what they do. This is exactly how they destroy people." "Who is they, Harry?" Colbert asked, genuine concern now mixing with his professional instincts. "You're on my show, talking to me. Nobody else is doing anything to you. The media, the establishment, people like you who pretend to care about mental health until someone actually shows real human emotion." Prince Harry was now pacing behind the guest chair, his movements agitated and unpredictable. "Then suddenly, it's entertainment. Suddenly it's content for your show." The situation had devolved so far beyond a normal interview that even Colbert seemed at a loss for how to proceed. His producers were clearly signaling from off-stage, and security was now positioned at multiple points around the studio. "Harry, I need you to sit down and take some deep breaths," Colbert said, his voice taking on the tone someone might use with a person having a mental health crisis. "This isn't helping anyone, least of all you. Don't you dare patronize me." Prince Harry whirled around to face Colbert directly, his eyes wild and unfocused. "Don't you dare talk to me like I'm having some kind of breakdown when you're the one who caused this." "I asked you questions about your work," Colbert replied, his own voice finally showing signs of strain. "That's what interviews are. Questions and answers. If you can't handle questions about your public advocacy, maybe you shouldn't be doing public advocacy." Prince Harry's response was to grab the small side table next to the guest chair and shove it violently to one side, sending the decorative plant and water glass crashing to the floor. The sound of breaking glass seemed to shock even him for a moment, but it was too late. The studio erupted. Security guards immediately moved toward the stage. Audience members were now actively fleeing their seats, and Colbert was stepping further, back from his desk with his hands raised in a gesture that was part surrender, part attempt to calm the situation. "That's enough," Colbert said firmly, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Security, please escort Prince Harry from the studio. This interview is over." "You can't kick me out," Prince Harry shouted, even as security guards were approaching him from multiple angles. "I'm trying to help people. I'm trying to make a difference, and you're treating me like some kind of criminal." "You just destroyed property on live television," Colbert replied, his professional demeanor finally cracking to show genuine anger. "After spending 20 minutes having a complete meltdown because I asked you to explain your work. This isn't about helping people anymore. This is about you." As security guards reached Prince Harry, he made one final desperate attempt to regain control of the narrative. "This is exactly what's wrong with mental health discourse in this country," he yelled, even as he was being gently but firmly guided away from the stage. "The moment someone shows real emotion, real humanity, you pathologize it and throw them out. Real humanity doesn't include destroying other people's property because you don't like their questions," Colbert called after him, his voice carrying clearly through the studio despite the chaos. Prince Harry's final words as he was escorted off the stage were perhaps the most damning of all. "You'll all see how this gets edited. You'll see how they make me look crazy while protecting their precious host." The studio fell silent except for the sound of cleaning crews already moving to address the broken glass and overturned furniture. Colbert stood alone at his desk, looking out at an audience that was equal parts shocked, horrified, and fascinated by what they had just witnessed. He took a deep breath, straightened his tie, and looked directly into the camera with the kind of composure that comes from decades of live television experience. Well, folks, that was certainly something. I guess when someone spends years talking about mental health awareness, we shouldn't be surprised when they give us a very clear demonstration of what that looks like when it goes wrong. The irony was inescapable. A man who had built part of his public persona on mental health advocacy had just provided the most compelling evidence possible that awareness and actual emotional regulation are two very different things. And there you have it, one of the most spectacular celebrity meltdowns ever caught on live television. A prince who preaches mental health awareness completely losing his mind the moment someone asked him to explain his work. Make sure to subscribe for more incredible stories like this, and drop a comment below telling me what you think was the exact moment Prince Harry completely lost it.